Today on Schrödinger's Dungeon, we're going to talk about what's involved in assembling a group for an RPG campaign. Then, we'll dive into questions that have come up in your campaign.
Well, let's unbox that.
So, today, we wanted to start off just talking a little bit about how you set up a tabletop group, just launch into the basic issues, because there can be a lot of those. And I think the easiest place to start, in my experience, is looking at the expectations you have from the very get-go. Does that sound like a good place from you?
Yeah, definitely what you have in your mind and what's going to be put on the table. You got to know what you're stepping into before you want to do it.
And it's real important, in my experience, to make sure that the game master, who's organizing things from the get-go usually, is going to be on the same page as the players. Because if people are going into it with different expectations, you're going to run into problems sooner rather than later.
And I've noticed with a lot of more modern games, even in their rule books now, they have more collaborative PC building and group building that's built into the mechanics of actually creating your characters off the get-go, which I think has been a great idea for RPGs in general.
I couldn't agree with you more. Dresden Files was one of the really games that I thought really hit the sweet spot on that, where you've got the players helping one another build characters and also building the setting as part of that character generation process.
And the new World of Darkness does the same thing of how to get all the characters together. And even if they don't have an actual mechanic, as some game systems do, most of them will say, hey, get your players together so that you guys can figure out how you're going to get all together. That makes sense of just you met at a pub or what have you. The old trope from D&D back in the day.
You mean we shouldn't always just start in a tavern?
Not all the time.
maybe you're right. One of the things I think that's critical in that early stage, as you're getting everybody together and trying to get a feel, is how long you want that campaign to last. It's okay to just play one-shots, but sometimes you want something that's an epic campaign and it's going to run, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. And while saying, hey, I want to get a bunch of guys together for 10 years, may be a little intimidating initially, letting them know the difference between this is a one-time Friday night thing and letting them know that, no, this is really something I want to keep doing for a while is important.
Definitely. I've noticed a lot of times where you have this great idea and people might be on board for it for maybe 1, 2, 3 sessions, and then it starts to peter out quickly. And I think that happens to a lot of GMs where they have this grand idea and either it's too slow of a burn or the players aren't really expecting to, like you said, have a 2-year campaign or something like that. Like, unless you're really upfront, like, I want this game to last a while. Like, this is going to be a huge campaign, and I'm looking for people that have a commitment to actually play in a huge campaign. If you don't, then your group's going to fall apart fairly quickly after the initial, this is fun, then, okay, I'm getting into something else, I want to do something else, and then everything just kind of goes pear-shaped.
It makes great audio, but I'm nodding as Nate's going here. And yeah, that's absolutely it. There's a big difference between playing, a 1978 D&D adventure that was 30 pages maybe, and, Masks of Nyarlathotep or the Pendragon campaign that's long, really long. And it makes your players and your group collectively needs to have some idea what you're getting into. And that can be important whether it's a group that have been playing together and they know each other, but they may not realize they're committing to this long of a campaign, especially if you've got a group that's switched from story to story. Mm-hmm. But it also is obviously important for somebody who's fairly new to the game.
Oh, definitely. As far as campaign lengths go, too, it's important to kind of also set up in your own mind, how long do you really want it to go? Like, everybody can create this gigantic epic story, but if you really, let's say, have time constraints, let's say, back in the day, your buddies would only be in from a couple of months in summer or something like that, and being like, hey, I want to do a summer campaign, so instantly it's only going to be a couple of months. It's not going to be, a ton of game time, but you still want to have a campaign. You definitely want to be like, all right, well, I need to have the expectation to have a story that I can get done in this time frame. So you're not just leaving a cliffhanger that will maybe never get completed.
And that's a great segue, because I think an important thing to build on with that is knowing how long you're going to play for each session and how often you're going to meet between sessions, because that makes a big difference. Like you said, if it's a summer campaign or an after-school campaign during the semester, you need to know not just how long you have to do it, but how often you're going to meet during that time frame and how long you're going to be able to meet for each of those sessions.
And having the commitment, as obviously two guys here who are a bit older, it's not like how it used to be where, you get together with your buddies, every Monday after school, we're playing D&D for 5 hours, 6 hours, whatever it is, and that happened every Monday. But now, with kids and work and all that other stuff, it really does take a bit of scheduling and commitment to be like, all right, I'm going to definitely be, barring acts of God or what have you,
sure,
trying to be at the sessions and scheduling all that is really a pain sometimes.
Yeah, and we're going to hit a little more on scheduling in a bit, but I do think it's good to be upfront and make sure people know what kind of commitment you're looking for. And asking for a longer-term commitment may not be the best place you want to start with when you're trying to organize a new group of gamers for getting together. It's often going to be better to have a low-commitment thing in the hopes that maybe you'll hook somebody to want to keep coming back. And that's definitely something to take into consideration with people who are new to the game. Don't say, hey, would you like to hang out with me every Saturday night for the rest of your life? Because usually you need a ring for that.
Yeah.
But perhaps another approach is, hey, let's hang out this Saturday, and I've got this hobby that I think you might dig.
Well, if you're getting new players, definitely. But if you have established players, like you said, it is tough to get a new player into a group a lot of times.
Sure.
And being upfront with exactly what type of commitment you are talking about, that's going to go a long way to even getting the person to be like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll do this. I mean, like you said, if you're just like, hey, this Saturday we're doing something, it's at this time, approach it as like a one-off and be like, hey, did you like it? Would you want to keep playing this? That definitely is, like you said, a much better tactic than, hey, we meet every Thursday.
And
show
you
up.
Must attend.
Right. Show
up. Related to that, as you said, weekly. Not everybody can make weekly, and not every game group needs to meet weekly, whereas conversely, some people need to meet 3 times a week. And hey, if you can swing that and everybody's into it, that's great. But everybody needs to be on the same page.
Oh, and it all depends on, like you said, like the campaign length that you have. I mean, sometimes if you're meeting bi-weekly and you want to have, let's say, if you're going to run the enemy within campaign from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, if you meet once a week or bi-weekly, that will probably take a good 5 years to run that entire campaign.
Absolutely. That's going to be one of those. Don't worry about making sure you're playing the latest edition of the game, because there'll be another one before you're done.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely will come down to time constraints on how, I guess, how imaginative you want to get with your campaigns.
Of course. Well, and how much your players are willing to be led by the nose versus how much they want to go off and explore.
Right.
Because when you've got something that's quite that intense, every game session where you're not following on the plot in the book that it's written is another game session that, well, we're adding one more to the total length of the campaign.
Yeah, and if it's so slow of a burn, people will. You're no matter what game that you play or what ideas you have, if the plot is so slow burning that they do not see progress of some kind for the main plot, you can have side plots all you want, but if you don't have main plot landmarks or whatever that happens at least, if not every session, every other session or something, sure, the main plot's going to start to fizzle out, and that's what really hooks in the players. That's what the goal that they want to accomplish. I mean, they want to be murder hobos, fine, but if you're going for a plot line and a storyline and none of that's coming to fruition at all, you're just kind of rolling dice and getting into random battles, that's going to get boring. I mean, as even if it's fun to do that, it's not going to keep people really interested in the game, or at least in my experience, that doesn't keep people really interested in the game, because it is about developing the story and the characters.
Yeah, it's harder to maintain engagement. That is another issue regarding play frequency that I find. The more time you go in between sessions, the more time of each session you're spending trying to remember. I'm old. Trying to remember what happened in the last session, and you're going through notes and looking at things going, did we do this last time, or did something else happen, or oh wait, yeah, that's what we did then. And that can eat up a lot of your playtime, which can also
slow
make
everything
it
down.
harder to actually see progress. Yeah,
and especially in the the older gamers who have, a significant amount of life outside of the game, when you meet up, let's say, I know some guys who would meet up once a month, and you would spend like 3 hours just catching up, having a couple of beers with your friends, and then starting to get into, what did we do last session? What did we do last session?
And so suddenly, when you had a 3 or 4 hour game session planned and you've chatted for 3 of it, you go, is it even worth starting another game?
Yeah. It's basically, hey, it was great catching up with you guys. Awesome. Now, that's not to say you can't schedule. There was a gaming group of older gentlemen that I knew that was playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and they could only get together twice a year. But they had a weekend of it where they would literally be like, all right, honey, I'm going to this hotel with my buddies, and I will see you Monday. And they played for as much as they could in that weekend, just hanging out with their friends, eating, drinking, sleeping, and playing RPGs. So, I mean, it is possible. I'm not saying like,
it's going to be a real hardcore weekend by the end of it. It'll be a good time.
It's like having Gen Con every month or something, So, so scheduling, it has to go around not only what you're comfortable with, but what your players are going to be comfortable with, and what they want out of the game too. How long do they want to be playing?
And it's real important to disclose this to everybody. Make sure everybody's on board and has comparable expectations, or at least has an agreement on what's going to work for them, because everybody has their own commitments outside of the game, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, it's often you'll be like, hey, what about 2 weeks from now, Wednesday? Oh, well, I got Little League with the kids. Okay, well, what about next Saturday? Oh, no, I got this. And then everybody else can play except one person for that one Saturday. Or nobody can play this Saturday except the one person that couldn't play that Saturday. And so scheduling is something that is rough, especially, I think, when you get into what day of the week do you do it on?
Absolutely. Well, and that last point you mentioned, I think is a good segue to another element, and that's attendance. Yes. And what happens when everybody can get together, but one person can't, or 2 people can't? Do you still play? And if you play, what do their characters do? I mean, there's plenty of running jokes about, the characters just vanishing from the dungeon and things that going on, or the alternative, they're scouting ahead. They'll trip the traps for us. Yeah.
Or they fell under, got drunk and are passed out back at the inn or something like that. Yeah. There's storytelling ways to get around not having a character there, or in this case, a player to play that character. Personally, it's kind of a mixed bag. It depends a lot of times on the game and who you have playing. If the character that is missing, the person who is missing, tends to be a charismatic person or at least in the group, who really makes a lot of the decisions and kind of is that galvanizing force for the group, it'd be really tough to run the game without them there, because that is pretty much like, that's the motivator, you could say. Like, there's tons of different types of players that we'll probably get to in another one.
I'm sure we'll have to.
Most parties will have 1 or 2 people that kind of just naturally take the lead as far as decision making goes. And I mean, I have friends of mine who I've role played with for many, many years who really just enjoy the fights, the fighting. They're kind of quiet when it comes to any social interactions. I mean, every now and again they'll throw out a nugget of advice or something like that, but that's pretty far and few between. You have those 1 or 2 players that really do a lot of the talking and a lot of the interaction. And if they're not there, it's really tough to get the PCs, because they're just not used to doing it. It's not like they're used to showing up, having a good time, but not the ones that are interacting with the plot as much. They're kind of there for the ride,
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that can be an issue. In my groups, we usually had a rule that if we were going to be down 2 people, we wouldn't play. Mm-hmm. But if we were just going to be down 1 person, we'd still play. And it kind of made it that rule regardless of what was happening. Mm-hmm. We also made it a general rule of thumb that if somebody was missing, we were still going to give them whatever game awards happened, whether it was XP or something else.
Yeah.
Because asynchronous advancement was just way more trouble than it was worth.
Yeah, and it also kind of alienates that player, like, hey, I had to go to a wake or something like that.
Yeah. Or
life is more important than the game.
My mom was in the hospital with a heart palpitation. Okay, dude, yeah.
But at the same time, if you have people who are just like, I don't feel like playing tonight. Okay, well, that's okay. And then
Well,
after a while.
Yeah, after that happens a few times, then you need to have that discussion.
Yeah, with the group.
With the group and that player
Oh,
saying, hey, do you really want to be here?
Yeah. Like this is meant for entertainment.
Yeah.
This is what we do to escape the reality we're in. Not
And if you don't want to come, that's fine, right? There doesn't need to be consequences, but we can't hold a spot for you forever because we need that fourth or fifth person at the table,
right?
Just for the fun of the game. And with that, I also like to talk about the idea that everybody has a comparable level of commitment to the game, or at least has an expectation to how religious they want to be about making sure that they're hitting sessions consistently. Sometimes that can mean, every week. Other times that can mean, hey, if I'm going to miss, I try to give you notice unless it's an emergency thing.
Mm-hmm. And
other times it can mean, we're just going to schedule these games catch as catch can. But you need everybody to be on that same kind of page about it, right? I think if you got one or two people that are real gung-ho about it and you got 3 or 4 people that aren't, that group probably isn't going to last for a real long time.
And yeah, I mean the commitment that comes to just showing up, like you were saying. If you want to be there, you're probably going to be more engaged with the game because it's something you want to be doing. If ever anything becomes an obligation, obviously, where it's just like, I'm not really having that much fun, but I'm going to go there because I've been going there. I mean, that's not, in my opinion, very fun. Like, that's not like, why would you be going here?
You're going to build up resentment
right
in the long term, and it's just not going to create a good social environment for the game to develop.
But like you said, being upfront off the very bat, just being like, hey, I have this idea for 3 months.
Yeah.
I have 3 months of an adventure. At least I think it will take 3 months. Might be a little longer, might be a little less. I want to play once a week. This is the give like a couple of days, or don't just be like it has to be this day at this time, because that's obviously not going to work. But be like, okay, I have these 3, 4, 5 days that I could do it from these times. Who would be interested in it? And if you're upfront with that off the very rip, like most of the time, the people that will want to play the game will already know, hey, okay, this is exactly what you're expecting of me to be here. Then that's fine. That's fine. If you're more ambiguous about it, like, hey, I want to do a D&D game, and
I like the idea of playing a game, but actually showing up to someone's house or even logging into a Zoom session, no, I can't do that.
Yeah. Like, and then, like you said, you'll fill up a spot. You'll be like, hey, I need 5 players. And maybe 2 of them are like, no, I don't want to do it.
Yeah, I decided I needed beer more than I needed the game this week.
Right.
Well, yeah, okay, maybe you're not the best fit then.
Right. And that's another thing, finding the fit.
Yeah. Well, we're going to come back to that one too. Scheduling issues was the next thing I had on the list of topics, and that was just, again, making sure you're upfront with everybody. Like you said, setting out a series of nights that can work. Some groups are going to want to play on a weeknight because they want to have their weekends free for other stuff.
Right.
Other people are only free on the weekends. And whether that's night, day, or morning, you need to be clear about that.
Right. I've noticed that weekly games, on average, and there's exceptions to every rule, but most on average weekly games are best played during a weekday.
Me too.
For whatever reason, if you're trying to do a weekend game, it's a lot tougher, especially for older gamers who have other commitments where that literally is the only times that you can get to.
Stuff comes up with your kids. You need to go to a wedding. You need to, family suddenly come in town. That's much more likely to happen on a weekend.
But, 4 hours on a Wednesday, well, I could probably swing that.
Right.
You know?
At least 9 out of 10 Wednesdays. Yeah.
Right. And that's just personally what I've noticed, and that works really well. But if it's going to be a bi-weekly game, again, you want a longer session. So
generally speaking,
you'd have to have a weekend, and typically that weekend is going to be an evening game because you got stuff to do during the day. It's very rare that people are like, I'm going to wake up and go roleplay and then, do my stuff. No, that doesn't normally happen.
Yeah, after 8 hours sitting on my butt, drinking Mountain Dew and eating Cheetos, then I'm going to go run my errands and mow the lawn.
Yeah, that's just not going to happen. So
it's a great idea. What could possibly go wrong?
So, yeah, setting up when you're going to have a game is also, again, critical because if it's going to be a one-off, let's say, You know, you want to do like a little promo for a weird game or something, you know, and it'd be really cool to do it around Halloween or something like that. Like setting those types of one-offs up and setting that schedule for the appropriate time, that makes a lot of difference, to be honest with you.
Oh, sure. Weekends are going to be way better for those sorts of things because, again, it comes back to people generally have more availability until something comes up.
Right.
Another thing, I've had the experience of running games remotely, using virtual tabletops and not using virtual tabletops. The other thing I've also done is run a game where one of my players was on a laptop screen where everybody else was in person. I don't know if you've ever done either of those things.
I have not done a virtual game. It's just something I've never. I don't know. For me personally, I like having, you know, obviously with the pandemic and everything, it was not a possibility, but having people there, sitting down, seeing the reactions, rolling the dice, and a large part of role playing to me isn't just the game playing. It's having that social interaction with your friends, you know, and then a lot of times their physical presence is more important to me. But I know a lot of people who do exactly like you say. They have completely virtual games where you're all on a Zoom or whatever it may be, and I've seen it. They're very ornate. You have a map, and you have each person moving their person around, and the grid and everything. I mean, it's really, like, the technology for it is there. It really is amazing. Like, and if you have people, let's say, in a different country, that you guys can come together on a weekday night, and all of a sudden, you know, you have your friend from France playing with you. I mean, that's fantastic.
It really is great, and it really does open up the possibility for gaming with people that you haven't seen in years or decades even. Because it's trivial to get everybody in the same place at the same time, even though that same place is virtual. Yeah. But like you said, there are obvious downsides, right? I mean, you don't hear the clatter of the dice. You don't, you know, get to toast each other after a cool thing happened in the game, at least not to the same extent. You don't have the full sense of camaraderie.
Right.
But you know what? It's better than nothing.
Oh, definitely.
And so it's something to consider, and it's definitely something to consider when you're in that situation where you're going, I can't find a local group.
Yeah. Finding a gaming group that you fit into, if it can only be done virtually. Like I said, I've never done it. I've seen it. It looks cool. I'm not very technically savvy, I think, is the biggest problem with it. But I have a feeling like if I was presented a game that I couldn't play in person, but it was something I really wanted to play, and it was like I had other friends who were like, hey, do this, I might give it a shot. But yeah, for me, that's just personal. I mean, that's just me, and just like everybody else. And there might be people who only want to do virtual. Like I just want to be online. I want to be at home, comfortable, you know. Like,
I think a lot of people with any kind of social anxiety disorder are really helped out by
physical disorder or anything.
Either case,
whatever makes it easy.
Got an issue where you're just not comfortable being in those places, or you know, if you really don't want to clean your gaming room, it's a lot easier.
Or house in general,
Fair.
Apartment, whatever. Although if you have a really large group, I could see virtual being a really good, just for physical space. I mean, how many people can you honestly fit around an average dinner table?
Yeah, once you get past about 6 players.
Yeah, and there are games that have, there are games that I've seen that have 12 regular players, and 12 regular players.
I've run those games. It's exhausting.
The highest I ever ran at once was 10, and just getting through combat took a while. And you know, some people are just sitting there on their phones or whatever while you're interacting with others. It's like, I should get the second GM, helper GM for this.
I had a game in college with 17 players, 2nd edition D&D.
Oh my god!
We split it into 2 groups after maybe 3 or 4 sessions with everybody there because it's not viable at that point. And this was also before cell phones, so people distracted themselves in other ways. I think that pretty much covers the things we wanted to cover with just the basics of organizing that group, that first step of trying to bring people together.
Or at least getting your head wrapped around what you want to have.
Absolutely.
And conveying that off the rip to your prospective group.
And so I thought maybe now we could move into a few questions that we had gotten when we solicited folks looking for ideas for things they wanted to talk about from the roundtable side of things. And maybe Nate or I have a couple of ideas, and maybe they're all terrible ideas, and we'd love to hear from you either way. So let us know in the comments.
Going to tackle the first one?
Yeah, why don't you?
So it's talking about shared campaign worlds. What's it like to run two different groups in the same setting and time? I've had limited experience with this off the bat. In the 90s and early 2000s, we were playing a lot of World of Darkness, the old Vampire the Masquerade, and we had
Good stuff.
Oh yeah, and we had actually it was 3 different games running in the same with the same setting, obviously, just 3 different actual. You had the Vampire Night, then you had a Werewolf Night, and then you had a Hunter Night, and all the storylines, and it was 3 different GMs, but each GM was obviously in the other one, so you would play in each game, and then you would GM your own, and we had about 6 people total. Yeah, 6 people total. And to be honest, it was a blast. But it took I will not lie. I was running the vampire aspect of it. My friend Roland was running the werewolf aspect of it, and my other friend Kevin was running the hunter aspect of it. It took a lot of work between the 3 of us because we wanted our stories to interact, not just it took place in the same city. You know, the characters would actually kind of cross paths a lot of times, especially with the hunters that were hunting everybody down.
You've got to have them do that,
right.
No question.
And so it takes a lot more work because I have an idea. Like, we had an overall arching story arc, and we all had to agree on it. Like, it's rough sometimes to get a solid idea out of 3 different opinions.
Yes.
So it takes a lot of work, but to be honest, it's a very rewarding experience. I mean, the game only lasted for I think like 6 months, because it was just for a limited amount of time that we could do it in. But in that 6 months, we had, okay, this was the story that we want. How are we going to get to it with each of these 3 different storylines? And it was a blast to play. It really, really was. But it took a lot more effort because when I'm writing something for the game that I want to play, I'd have to email and be like, hey, this is what I'm going to throw into this. What do you guys think? Oh, no, that won't work for me. Here, can you edit it this way and that way? So it felt more like a writer's room than writing your actual adventure, because you had to have the input of the other 2 GMs. But it was fun. I will say, if you can find 2 other GMs that you can get along with,
that is important.
That is very, because we butted heads on a few ideas where one person like, I really want to implement this, or I really want to implement that, and we're like, that's really going to alter the game hugely, and we had to talk each other off the cliffs a little bit, but it never came to blows or anything crazy like that. It was just like you have one idea, and then when someone's like, no, you're like, I spent time on this idea, But it was by far one of the most rewarding games that we played. I had a blast playing in it. I had a blast running it, and having the characters come across each other, especially when the hunters were hunting your characters in essence. Sometimes It was awesome. It was just a very, very good game.
So I think it's really interesting that you did that with 3 GMs but 1 game group.
Yes.
Because I've participated in it from the opposite perspective, both as a GM and as a player, where I found out I was a player in one of 2 groups that a GM was running that were competing with each other.
Oh.
In an extended D&D campaign that I was playing in college. And this lasted probably about 8-9 months, where our group was competing with another group on this quest. And we had no idea that it was 2 groups of players.
Really?
Yeah. And that was really wild because we were playing and these other bastards would keep getting things ahead of us, or we'd accomplish something and find out that, we just kicked those NPCs, right? And we just obliterated those NPCs by getting that thing way ahead of them. And so now we're further along in accomplishing this quest. And then finally, at the last session, we go to show up for the game, and there's 6 other people there. So we had a group of 12 with the game master for that final session. Wow. where all these characters finally came face to face. And that was totally unexpected, and it was amazing. I mean, it was a fantastic conclusion. And it had to be a ton of work on the game master to keep all those balls in the air at once. I had run a game similar to the one you were talking about with hunters and vampires and mages, also World of Darkness, but it was just mage, where I had 4 different levels of mages. But like yours, that was with 1 game group where people had different characters that they would play based on which the scene was, and we had kind of a troop set up so that one person was the apprentice to another person's mage, and another person was a master, and then another NPC within the setting. So everybody ended up with 4 characters that had different ties to different aspects of the campaign. And again, that was, like you said, very rewarding. But after a certain point, that got to be a lot of a load on the players, in addition to me, because everybody was trying to remember which character's motivations came into play at which point.
I gotcha.
Yeah, and then one other one I had was we had a game where we had a good party and an evil party playing in the same setting. And the good party had been going for a while. And when I say good, we weren't explicitly evil. Okay. We had financial motivations, let's say. But the evil party was really evil. Like necromancy, demons. And when we said, okay, yeah, we want to create the party that's in opposition to our good party, so we're going to create evil characters, that devolved very rapidly to the point that I'm not sure I'd really advocate trying to do an all-evil party for anybody, at least.
I mean, there's game systems that, or even games that really do cater towards the more, I guess, amoral aspect of a game.
Sure.
And those can be a blast to play as well. But I think like what we're talking about is running a game that has multiple facets in it. Just basically, the best advice that I can personally give is, you got to, if you're going to have another GM, or more, you have to be on the same page with them. If you're going to be doing it all yourself, you have to realize it's going to be a ton more work for you. A ton more work.
Notes are everything. If you can record your sessions, record them, because you're going to want to go back and watch them again.
So if you think it's a cool idea, but you're like, well, I don't know if I can spend 2 or 3 hours every other night to write stuff for this and just to correlate everything. I mean, because there's times where a game can get extremely complicated. There's, like I said, so many moving parts to it where
it's not a linear relationship for trying to run 2 games at once. There's exponential elements there.
Right. So if it's something you're interested in, I would say, in my personal experience, having another GM lightens the load significantly. I had to focus on my game. Just the overall arch is what we all had to focus on. So we wouldn't get too specific. Obviously, we didn't want to ruin the game for the same GMs who are playing in it.
Absolutely.
So if you get more GMs, make sure there's somebody that you can at least work with. You know, obviously, if they're friends of yours, you get along pretty well. But and if you're going with, I'm going to just run more games in the same thing, and I'm just going to be the focal point of it, realize you're going to have a huge amount of work for it to
Let me throw out one other wonky thing that I just thought of that's actually relevant to this, that I've had happen at a con. I don't know if you've ever done it, and actually Carlos pitched me doing it here sometime, and I don't know if we ever will, but that's running 2 games simultaneously, where you've got the 2 game masters in radio contact with one another or going back and forth to meet, where you've got them both exploring related areas.
Yeah, I had a game of All Flesh Must Be Eaten run at a Gen Con.
Yeah.
I was a player in it. There was over 100 players, and they had, I think, 15 or almost 20 GMs.
Oh, wild.
And it all took place in the same city, and all of these people were doing their own thing, but they were all, eventually, it was basically an elimination thing where the zombies would eventually kill off most people, and it started off in a huge room, then it got smaller and smaller until it was just the remaining players at one table. And it was built that way. You know, they were saying like this was gigantic. Yeah, it was a midnight. It started at midnight and ran through the night. It was a great fun experience. That, I think, I couldn't see doing a whole campaign of that.
No, definitely not.
As a one-off, I think
a 4-hour game,
just the novelty of it is fun. Yeah. But again, you have to get with people that you can get along with, work with, and you have to get a lot of groundwork done for that. You have to do a lot more planning. I'm not just going to show up and be like, okay, well, here's our plot, let's go.
Yeah, you've got to have very specific timing elements, because you know, at the 15-minute point, everybody has to agree that if this is a 4-hour session, pretty much every 15 minutes has to be blocked out.
Right.
Because otherwise,
it'll be bad though.
Well, you're going to have one table going, okay, what do we do now? Right. And the other tables are still scrambling.
Right.
Yeah. Next question I had on the list was, how do you get players who are devoted to one game system to be willing to try another? And I think let's talk about the elephant in the room. It tends to be you got folks who are really devoted to Dungeons and Dragons, And if you're a game master or a player who likes another setting or system, how do you get them to step away from Dungeons and Dragons and try your other system? And your reasons for wanting that other system really aren't going to be the most compelling thing. The getting people to step outside their comfort zone is really the big issue here, because people have invested their lives in some game systems, and often they've, not just their time, but money too. They've bought books, they've bought dice, they've bought miniatures, they've bought wallpaper or calendars or,
Costumes,
water bottles, right, for that specific game system. And the idea of playing something that isn't that is foreign to them. And this happens with other games too. I mean, Magic players aren't real anxious to jump out and try Keyforge or Digimon or whatever other game you want to mention.
Well, I think that one of the biggest things is not only just comfort zone, but you have an investment in a game.
Absolutely.
And if you're going to try to introduce people to a different game, mechanic wise or whatever, you definitely want to start off with just, here's a one-off. You got 4 hours. I want to run this. I want to see what it's like. How does the game match up? And if you can have a compelling story for those people to be in, then I think that goes a long way. Because if they can associate a good story to that game system, then it's all of a sudden, well, this is kind of interesting. You definitely have to have pre-generated characters.
And that was the next thing I was going to say. You don't want to have that one-off start with character generation, because you don't want the people you're bringing into it to have to make any huge time commitment outside of that 4-hour session.
Sitting down to
and
play.
You want to make sure that 4-hour session is actually playing the game.
Yes.
Yeah, because if it's, it's a 4-hour game session, but here's a 600-page rule book. Could you read it first?
Yeah.
Would you mind?
Yeah.
Oh, good, because I know you got time for that.
Yeah, like I find I've run a lot of one-offs just to see how a game system goes.
Absolutely.
And every time I always follow the same basic steps here. I know the rules. That's really important. Don't just pick up a book and be like, I kind of want to run this, but you have no idea how to run it, because obviously nobody else does either, and everyone's looking at you to know how to run it.
Absolutely.
Not knowing every single rule and having to look through the book is okay.
No, I mean,
but you need to know the basics and some of the more advanced
and
stuff.
It's going to be okay if you get some things wrong during that one-off, right?
Oh,
if you come back to your players afterwards and go, oh, the reason that, your attempt to scale that wall didn't feel right was, oops, I didn't read the wall climbing rules right.
Right. There's no Inquisition that's going to, RPG Inquisition that's going to kick down your door and burn you for it.
If only. If only.
But you first have to read the rules and understand them enough to run a game, right?
Yes, no question.
Then you have to make pre-generated characters and interesting ones. Not just interesting to you, but interesting for the group of players that you're going to have.
And ideally, you should put in some kind of hooks so that those characters have predefined ways of interacting, right? Not just with the setting, but with each other.
Yes. That's the other thing. Backgrounds.
Absolutely.
Can't be too long. You don't want pages and pages, but
you don't
at least a couple of paragraphs
of
this is who it is, this is what they do, this is how they're together, this is why they're where they're at. Yeah. And that will go, again, that takes all of the responsibility of the player has now been completely alleviated by you. All they have to do is literally show up, sit down, read a little bit of a background, maybe ask a few questions about what stats and whatever are, but you can get straight into the game. And the other thing is, the adventure that you run, it cannot be excessively complicated.
No. It needs to have story points that you can just check off in your head as you hit them.
Right. I've heard this before. It's from an old game designer, but he said a complex game is excellent. Complexity is great, like having different options and figuring out. But if it's complicated, it is not a good game. Complexity is one thing. It really is. You can have a pretty diverse plot. You can have an intricate plot as long as that plot doesn't have a huge amount of complications in it, of maybe they have to hit this roll or they have to do this or they have to do that. That's not going to go very well, especially with people who are just learning what the characters can do. Because sometimes if you're like, oh, it's dependent on these couple of skills and the player has no idea what these skills do, that's not going to be very useful for you. So the plot and the very first game is really important for you to really kind of spend time on to make it interesting and easy. And the other thing I found out that works out really well is if you have a bit of the game that is complicated, let's say most of the time Magic.
Sure.
if you have
vehicle rules,
right.
Always vehicle rules. Yeah.
If you have a little printout that you make of bullet points to say, this is how you can cast a spell, or this is how combat goes, and you just throw that into the, because I normally use a folder, and I'll have the character sheet, background, and then these little bullet points of, hey, this is how this thing works for this character. That way you don't have the guys scrambling for the same book the entire game.
Now,
and you can just go.
What I do, and you may not do the same thing, when I have those kinds of cards ready to go, I don't give them to the players till they're relevant, right? Because I want that first time when they sit down and look at the sheet for them to see the sheet and for them to see the background information and the interactions. I don't want them to suddenly be overwhelmed by how does this subsystem work. So I'm going to come up with that subsystem when they need it. I'm not, again, just to try and keep them from being overwhelmed at an early stage.
And the other thing for getting people into the game is you want a smaller group when you're running a one-off to get people interested in a game. If you have like 8 people, that's going to be because again, you're probably, unless you're running a game that you are extremely familiar with already, you're probably just learning the system too. And having that many people is going to be a lot more difficult to keep tabs of what's going on for everybody, because they're all going to have a ton of questions, and it's going to bog down the game and the story.
Yeah,
4 to 5, perfect for it.
If your game group is 4 to 6 people,
that's fine.
That's probably going to be fine. If your game group is 8, it might be worth it to split it down to 4 and run it twice, right? I mean, it's not the end of the world.
Get everybody's opinion if they're down for it.
Yeah.
But there's, to be honest, like the heart of the question is, what can I do to? The fact is, you can do nothing. They're either going to like that game or they're not. But you can make at least the attempt to be like, hey, this is something I want to do. I think it'd be enjoyable. Let's give it a try. And if they don't like it, they don't like it. You can't do anything about it. You can run a perfect game with a perfect group with all the bells and whistles and everything, and people will be like, you know what? I still want to just play D&D.
Yeah,
and that's fine.
You can't strong arm people into this. Again, it's for fun. If somebody feels like they've been forced into doing something, they're going to go into it with a chip on their shoulder. It's not going to be fun for them or for you, really.
Right. Let's see. What's the next one here? My players aren't jumping into the action the way I want them to. Instead, they're just waiting for me to narrate until I prompt them for actions. How can I motivate them to be more proactive?
Yeah, that's a fun one. I've certainly had that issue with players who sit down and expect to be entertained instead of to participate in the story. And yeah, that can be a problem. I'm not always sure what the best way is, other than kind of doing how does your character react? Or specifically having an NPC address them with a question or come up and be interested in them for some particular, unusual reason. Like the dog comes over because that person mentioned that they were storing their leftover food in their pouch or whatever, and suddenly they've got a shtick that you can latch onto for later things.
I call it the breadcrumb method, where you're just throwing out enough. I know that a lot of PCs, I shouldn't say all of them, but a lot of PCs, a lot of gamers, when it comes to role playing, where they're actually interacting with the NPCs and just talking, you have the players that are really into just talking, and then you have the players who are like, I want to use my charm skill. I'm just going to roll a die. I don't want to talk about all this. I just want to roll the die and get the pertinent information, and that's it. It tends to be the latter, the ones who'd like to roll more, that doesn't really get the hooks a whole lot of times, because you got to know your party, basically. I mean,
you got to know your players more than your characters.
You got to know your players. So and I've had groups where a majority is, I really just like to roll dice and kill stuff and whatnot. Like, and then I have the ones who like, all right, when we get into battles, I'm describing how my longsword is hitting people. I'm describing all this stuff. Like the ones who kind of naturally go into those types of descriptions normally take hooks and bait a lot easier and better.
That's fair, yeah.
And if you have a group where there isn't a whole lot of that, it's kind of like that old saying, you can lead a horse to water, you can't get him to drink. So unfortunately, there's nothing that you can truly, I mean...
There is one thing I've had success with, and that's in-game rewards. So different games have different reward points Savage Worlds has bennies.
Right.
Genesis has fate tokens. D&D, I think, has luck points. And I'm liberal with them. When somebody does something that hooks on to something that I want, I give those out.
Right.
Right? I encourage the behavior that I want to see at the table. And I will usually make no bones about it. If people are hamming it up and grabbing onto the hooks, then I'm going to reward them. And oftentimes that will motivate players who aren't motivated by anything else, because it means that their character kicks ass more in combat because they got those rewards.
They got those bennies to toss it. Like that actually is great sound advice, but in my experience, it's you either have a person that really will always jump in, or you'll have somebody who's always looking for a lead, or somebody else to have them jump in.
Sure.
Like, I get what you're saying with the bennies and stuff. Yeah, that will get the people that are kind of on the fence.
Yeah,
but
probably.
In all honesty, the only thing that you can do as a GM is just keep the story going. You don't want it to be like, all right, I'm gonna wait for the PCs. Just that you have to throw those breadcrumbs out, and sometimes you have to hit them in the head with a shovel if you want the game to keep going.
Subtle doesn't always work.
Right. And some people are like, oh, that's that's just railroading. It's like, well, you know what? There's some people who like railroad games.
Absolutely.
They like going from A to B to C.
How many copies of Horror on the Orient Express have sold, after all?
Oh yeah. I mean, it is basically like you either have the breadcrumbs or you have the shovel, and or the carrot on the stick for some people.
Sure.
You always have that. So as a GM, know your group. You can try, like you said, with bennies or in-game rewards to get more interaction. But in the end, your players are only going to participate as much as they feel comfortable and how much they want to.
And not everybody has the same comfort level, right? And sometimes that comfort level will increase as the campaign goes on. So you can't always expect everybody to be on their A game at that first demo where you got the whole group together.
Right.
But, I mean, encourage the kind of behavior that you want to see, but don't punish people that can't.
Never.
Yeah.
I can't stress that enough. You do not want to have the favored teacher's pet characters. It will tear a group apart. You have your players that take the lead. That's fine. It doesn't mean you have to lavish everything on them. It just means that, hey, at least these people keep the game. I always think, though, if you make something somewhat more particular to a character, that person who's playing that character will always be more interested, obviously.
Absolutely. If they've got a particular skill set or a particular, quirk in the character that ties in, if you can leverage that, absolutely.
Right. So just like Benny's, be like, all right, well, here's this one part. And, obviously as a GM, you're like, okay, well, this player really just kind of rolling dice and just, no, I hit him for 8 points of damage. Like not really totally interacting in it. But they're there. They want to play. Yes. And so if you maybe the next session be like, all right, like I had a player who really just liked combat, and it was an Warhammer game. He got his hand chopped off and decided to turn it into a mace by having it bronzed. I thought it was a fantastic idea. Like this guy, he was really excited about him. All right, so I actually had, them leave the town they were at to continue the storyline, but to come back so that he could pick up that club with his, bronzed hand inside of it or whatever. And to be honest, that little bit, I even made a short little side quest thing that really focused on him getting that, and it really livened him up, like as far as that next few game sessions go. But then it was, after a little while, it's kind of just back to which is fine, because that's what he liked doing it. Yeah.
If the person's coming regularly and they're contributing and they're having fun, a lot of times that can be all you can ask for.
Right.
But that does also mean that you can't depend on that player or that player's character to be the one who's going to take point in solving the mystery or triggering the next step in the adventure.
And don't beat yourself up if you can't. Like the way you have fun and the way your character or the group is having fun, it might be very, very different.
Absolutely.
And unless you have people, because believe me, players will tell you, like, if they're not having a good time, they might be there and they'll start to converse outside of it, go on Facebook, whatever distractions
or
they have.
Or just stop showing up.
Yeah. You'll know. So don't try to beat yourself up if you don't get everybody involved the way you think that everybody should be involved. As long as they're still coming there and they're having a good time, and you kind of throw those crumbs out to them enough, you've done what you have to do as a GM, in my opinion, to keep the game going and keep people entertained. Because that's really what you're trying to do, is just be entertaining.
And have fun.
Yes.
And I think that's
More
probably a good stopping point for this first episode. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. We did have a couple other things we want to thank. First off, Joe, for being our producer over there and handling the board. Appreciate that, Joe. We couldn't have gotten through this without you.
Also, obviously, thanks to Immortals Inc. and Rocky River for hosting all of this. I think you have the list of the open events that are coming up.
I wanted to make sure, check out immortalsinc.com to get all the latest news from the game shop. But yeah, we do have in-store gaming active in the store. In-store gaming in the store. Brilliant, John. Yes. In-store gaming is active once again. State's mask requirements are gone, though I believe people are welcome to wear them if they prefer.
The only caveat is if you want to wear a mask and somebody else isn't wearing a mask, you keep that to yourself, and vice versa. This is open, whatever makes people comfortable.
Absolutely.
Put it that way.
And we on Sundays, first and third Sunday of the month, they have in-store Age of Sigmar. Second and fourth, they've got Dungeons and Dragons Adventure League. Mondays, we've got Card Fight Vanguard. Tuesdays are Digimon. Wednesdays, again, are AD&D Dungeons and Dragons Adventure League. Thursdays are Warhammer 40k Open Gaming. Fridays are Magic. And Saturdays, they've got Commander-style Magic. So come on down, get your game on, and check and see what new things have come in since the last time you stopped by.
Yeah, just come on down to the store. Basically, just come on in. You're bound to find somebody who wants to play a game, whatever flavor you're looking for.
Until next time, if you got more questions, hit our Facebook page at Schrödinger's Dungeon, GM Roundtable, and we will love to hear your questions and comments. Take care.